Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Push Me Poll for July 1990, wrestling's only objective, weighted, data-driven ranking system based on which pro wrestlers were getting the biggest push across the industry in a given month and year. WWF World Champion. The Ultimate Warrior remains at number 1 this month and was facing a recovered, ravishing Rick Rude, ranked number 2 for July, both on the house show circuit and on the 27th Saturday night's main event TV special heading into their big cage match at SummerSlam next month. This match had been building for the last few months. Rude was the only man to have ever beaten the Ultimate Warrior for the IC title at WrestleMania 5. And now that Warrior had become world champion, Rude had been training like hell to repeat the feat in a series of vignettes, and got himself a sharp new, serious wrestler haircut as well. Rude jumps Warrior from behind to start the match, but Warrior shrugs it off. Manager Bobby Heenan causes a distraction, allowing Rude to hit Warrior in the head with the title belt and hit a sleeper hold, but again Warrior rallies. After a struggle to hit the Rude Awakening, Rude finally hits it, but Warrior kicks out and powers up, hitting clotheslines, a shoulder block, and a big splash. But Heenan breaks up the count, causing a DQ. Warrior beats up Heenan and Rude after the bell, and we get the big cage match rematch at SummerSlam. The problem with this was that Warrior had kicked out of the Rude Awakening, Rude's finisher, before Heenan's interference, which completely neutralized any threat Rude actually presented going into SummerSlam, the company's second biggest show of the year, next month. There were just weird, kind of nonsensical booking decisions happening left, right, and center in the WWF in the first half of 1990, particularly around Warrior as champion, and in retrospect, you can clearly point to this time period as when the WWF started to gradually go into decline after its glory years of the mid to late 80s. Vince seemed almost distracted from the product in this era. Hogan, his cash cow, had temporarily left to take time off. The No Holds Barred movie had been panned and not been the success Vince and Hogan had hoped for. He tried to make inroads into the Japanese market at the start of the year, which hadn't gone as planned. Plus, depending on who you believe, preliminary discussions about bringing in Ric Flair to potentially face Hogan had all, for now, come to naught. Anyway, it all amounted to Vince McMahon and the WWF slightly taking its eye off the ball in mid-1990, and decisions like giving away your SummerSlam PPV main event for free on TV the month before, and having the champion cleanly kick out of his challenger's big finishing move was a weird way to sell a big event, and kind of exemplified the confusing state of play in the WWF in this moment. Jesse Ventura, Vince's longtime right-hand man on commentary, was about to leave the company over a dispute as well. Elsewhere at the SNME show, new Intercontinental champion Mr. Perfect, ranked number 4 for July, beat Tito Santana in a very good match. Mr. Perfect had won the Intercontinental title, vacated after Warrior won the world title, in a tournament final over Tito back in May, and this was the rematch. Perfect had ended his association with the Genius and now had Bobby Heenan as his manager, joining Rick Rude, Haku, and others in the Heenan family, and Heenan's interference helped him retain. There's usually at least one surprise a month for me making the top 10, and this month it was Tito Santana making it in at number 9. In addition to the fantastic match against Perfect at Saturday night's main event, Tito was also main eventing lower-level house shows against Perfect, substituting for Brutus Beefcake, who had been in a program for the IC belt against Perfect, but suffered a horrible boating, parasailing accident that forced him into retirement for a few years. Anyway, it's kind of easy to forget that Tito was still surprisingly over in 1990. I kind of think of Tito as being in the IC title picture in the mid-80s, the tag team picture in the late 80s, and then kind of fading into obscurity in the early 90s, but he was definitely still one of the most over guys on the roster in 1990 and still a great worker too. Tag Team Champs Demolition, ranked number 7 for July, beat the Rockers in another great match at SNME, cheating to use their new 3-man advantage with Axe, Smash, and Crush. And bubbling under the top 10 for the month were the returning Hulk Hogan and his new buddy Tugboat gearing up for a showdown at SummerSlam against Earthquake and Dino Bravo, and Kerry Von Erich, who made his WWF debut as the Texas Tornado, having given up on the rapidly deteriorating world-class USWA merger in favor of actually making a bit of money again. Switching gears to the NWA, ranked at number 3 for July, Sting finally defeated Ric Flair to win the NWA World title in a changing of the guard moment at the Great American Bash PPV, with the odds finally stacked against the Four Horsemen by on-screen and off-screen executive Jim Herd. Sting's Dudes with Attitude faction, Junkyard Dog, Paul Orndorff, and the Steiner brothers, surrounded the ring to keep the Horsemen, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid Vicious, away while Ole Anderson was handcuffed to El Gigante on the rampway. The Horsemen, of course, did try to interfere, but the Dudes saw them off and Sting won clean with a small package to become the new world champ. This was kind of ridiculously overbooked, but I'm still making it my match of the month for July because the overbooking kind of worked. given how much interference the Horsemen had been running to keep the belt on Flair these past few months. Pulling out all the stops to prevent that interference kind of added to the moment rather than detracted from it. And I'll give the NWA props. They got this one right after a series of missteps and booking chaos in the first half of the year. This was a match 5 months in the making since the Horsemen kicked Sting out of the stable back at Clash X in February, and Sting injured his knee. Sting just no-sells Flair's offense to start, and the champion senses he's in trouble, getting dominated until a thumb to the eye turns the tide, and Flair works Sting's bad leg. They go back and forth until Sting hits the Stinger Splash and Scorpion Deathlock. El Gigante restrains Ole, and the dudes hold off the Horsemen, but Flair makes the ropes. A Sting backslide gets two, but he misses a knee charge and Flair goes for the figure four. Small package, pin, and Sting's the new world champion to a huge pop from the fans in front of the NWA's biggest crowd of the year. Really great moment. Departing champion Ric Flair makes number 8 this month, but kind of disappeared for the rest of the month after dropping the belt to Sting. The rest of the Horsemen were vowing to regroup on TV, but Flair was nowhere to be seen, and he was actually replaced in house show main event tag team matches alongside the Horsemen by Harley Race, the latest semi-retired veteran brought back in by Ole to bolster the roster. I'm not 100% sure what the story was here. Maybe he had an injury. Maybe he was letting Sting have the spotlight for a bit. Maybe he was tired from carrying the NWA on his back for the last 10 years and being wildly underappreciated by management who wanted him to be a mid-carder called Spartacus or whatever it was that Jim Herd was pushing for. IWGP champion Big Van Vader at number 10 was back in the U.S. making his WCW debut at the Great American Bash as well, squashing Tom Zenk on the undercard and being all kinds of impressive. Footage of Vader, quote-unquote, from Japan was shown on TV in the build-up to this, but he wasn't acknowledged as being the reigning IWGP champion at all. WCW and New Japan were only just starting to work out a business relationship at this point after New Japan's relationship with the WWF had soured. People still talk about The Undertaker's debut at Survivor Series later this year, but the Vader character's North American debut at the Bash was, to me, every bit as impressive in terms of intimidating aura and wow factor. Elsewhere at the Bash, U.S. champion Lex Luger beat the future Undertaker, Mean Mark Callis, while tag team champs Doom beat the Rock and Roll Express. Strong reset month for the NWA. Across the Pacific, it was another dramatic and somewhat scary month in All Japan on the Summer Action Series tour that saw Terry Gordy, ranked number 6, regain the Triple Crown title from Stan Hansen, ranked number 5, in a slugfest of a match on the 17th. Former champion Jumbo Tsuruta and the Great Kabuki teamed to beat Gordy and Steve Williams to win the World Tag Team titles on the 19th to let Gordy focus on singles, but then disaster struck, and Gordy almost died just 10 days after regaining the belt when he accidentally overdosed on drugs and alcohol the day before this big match against Misawa, had a heart attack, and went into a coma. Fearing the bad publicity of their champion potentially dying, All Japan immediately stripped Gordy of the title and declared it vacant, to be determined in a match between Misawa and the previous title holder, Stan Hansen. Hansen and Misawa have a decent, but not amazing, match for the vacant title that Hansen wins to become a 2-time Triple Crown champion, with Misawa's meteoric rise up the card being thwarted for now. As for Gordy, his health would recover temporarily, but he would never receive another title shot, and his main event run and planned singles mega push were essentially sadly over. So that's the July 1990 top 10. Bubbling under for New Japan IWGP Tag Team Champions, Keiji Muto and Masahiro Chono were the focus of the Wrestling Scramble Tour, while Vader was in the U.S., defending against the Road Warriors, who'd recently left the NWA, and others. In the U.S. territories, the Snowman was the USWA champion, while Jerry Lawler, in the process of turning face again, was teaming with Bill Dundee to feud with Tony Anthony and Eddie Gilbert. In EMLL in Mexico, the veteran Technico El Farion was getting some shine again this month. Although business was strong right now in Mexico, by the way, you're very rarely, if ever, going to see luchadors in these monthly Push Me Pull top 10s, though 1 or 2 may feature in the end-of-year PMP top 50. The reason for that is that there are just so many luchadors, and they tend to get rotated around the main events rather than lucha promotions consistently coalescing around just 1 or 2 top stars. There are obvious exceptions to that during different eras, but for the most part, that's the general lay of the lucha libre landscape. So it's about consistency at the top of the card over the course of a 12-month period on who the top-rated luchadors are going to be by the end of the year. For what it's worth, at this point, Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and El Dandy were running the highest points tally for EMLL, as we sequentially rack up the points for 1990, with the UWA promotion tailing off in terms of popularity from where it had been in years past. Finally, for the WWC in Puerto Rico, Universal Champion Carlos Colon went to a 60-minute draw against TNT, the future Savio Vega, at the promotion's 17th anniversary show at Bayamon, drawing a decent-sized crowd. So that's July 1990. Thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and join me next time for August, which will inevitably be dominated by the WWF's big SummerSlam show. Cheers.